Today in History, April 25th.
400 for BC. Admiral Lysander and King Pausanias of Sparta blockade Athens and bring the Peloponnesian War to a successful conclusion.
775, the Battle of Bagravan puts an end to an Armenian rebellion against the Abbasid Caliphate. Muslim control over the South Caucasus is solidified and its Islamization begins. While several major Armenian Nakar families lose power and their remnants flee to the Byzantine Empire.
799 after mistreatment and disfigurement by the citizens of Rome. Pope Leo III flees to the Frankish court of King Charlemagne.
1130 for the name Zagreb was mentioned for the first time in the Phoenician charter relating to the establishment of the Zagreb bishopric. Around 1094.
1607, 80 Years' War. The Dutch fleet destroys the anchored Spanish fleet at Gibraltar.
1644 Transition from Ming to Qing. The Chongzhen Emperor, the last emperor of Ming China, commits suicide during a peasant rebellion led by Li Ziqing.
1707 A coalition of Britain, the Netherlands and Portugal is defeated by a Franco-Spanish army at Almansa, Spain, in the War of the Spanish Succession.
1792, Highwayman Nicholas J. Pelletier becomes the first person executed by guillotine. 1792 La Marseillaise, the French national anthem, is composed by Claude-Joseph Rouget de Lisle.
1829 Charles Fremantle arrives in HMS Challenger off the coast of modern-day Western Australia prior to declaring the Swan River Colony for the British Empire. 1846 Thornton Affair. Open conflict begins over the disputed border of Texas, triggering the Mexican-American War.
1849 The Governor-General of Canada, Lord Elgin, signs the Rebellion Losses Bill, outraging Montreal's English population and triggering the Montreal riots.
1859 British and French engineers break ground for the Suez Canal.
1862 American Civil War. Forces under U.S. Admiral David Farragut demand the surrender of the Confederate city of New Orleans, Louisiana.
1864 American Civil War. In the Battle of Marks Mills, a force of 8,000 Confederate soldiers attacks 1,800 Union soldiers and a large number of wagon teamsters, killing or wounding 1,500 Union combatants.
1882 French and Vietnamese troops clashed in Tonkin when Commandant Henry Ray seized the citadel of Hanoi with a small force of Marine infantry.
1898 Spanish-American War. The United States Congress declares that a state of war between the U.S. and Spain has existed since April 21st, when an American naval blockade of the Spanish colony of Cuba began.
1901. New York becomes the first U.S. state to require automobile license plates.
1915. World War I. The Battle of Gallipoli begins. The invasion of the Turkish Gallipoli Peninsula by British, French, Indian, Newfoundland, Australian and New Zealand troops begins with landings at Anzac Cove and Cape Helles.
1916, Anzac Day is commemorated for the first time on the first anniversary of the landing at Anzac Cove.
1920 at the San Remo Conference, the principal allied powers of World War adopt a resolution to determine the allocation of Class, a League of Nations mandates for administration of the former Ottoman-ruled lands of the Middle East. 1938, U.S. Supreme Court delivers its opinion in Erie Railroad Co. v. Tompkins and overturns a century of federal common law.
1944, the United Negro College Fund is incorporated. 1945 World War II United States and Soviet reconnaissance troops meet in Torgau and Strela along the River Elbe, cutting the Wehrmacht of Nazi Germany in two. This would be later known as Elbe Day. 1945 World War II Liberation Day Italy. The National Liberation Committee for Northern Italy calls for a general uprising against the German occupation and the Italian Social Republic.
1945 United Nations Conference on International Organization. Founding negotiations for the United Nations begin in San Francisco.
1945 World War II. The last German troops retreat from Finnish soil in Lapland, ending the Lapland War. Military actions of the Second World War end in Finland. 1951 Korean War. Assaulting Chinese forces are forced to withdraw after heavy fighting with UN forces, primarily made up of Australian and Canadian troops, at the Battle of Kapiong.
1953 Francis Crick and James Watson publish Molecular Structure of Nucleic Acids, a structure for deoxyribose nucleic acid, describing the double helix structure of DNA.
1954 The first practical solar cell is publicly demonstrated by Bell Telephone Laboratories.
1959 The St. Lawrence Seaway, linking the North American Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean, officially opens to shipping.
1960 The United States Navy submarine USS Triton completes the first submerged circumnavigation of the globe.
1961 Robert Noyce is granted a patent for an integrated circuit.
1972 Vietnam War, Nguyen Hue Offensive. The North Vietnamese 320th Division Forces, 5,000 South Vietnamese troops, to retreat and traps about 2,500 others northwest of Canton.
1974 Carnation Revolution, a leftist military coup. In Portugal overthrows the authoritarian conservative Estado Novo regime and establishes a democratic government. 1980 146 people are killed when Air Flight 108 crashes near Los Rodeos Airport in Tenerife, Canary Islands.
1981 More than 100 workers are exposed to radiation during repairs at the Tsuruga nuclear power plant in Japan. 1982 Israel completes its withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula per the Camp David Accords. 1983 Cold War. American schoolgirl Samantha Smith is invited to visit the Soviet Union by its leader Yuri Andropov after he read her letter in which she expressed fears about nuclear war.
1983 Pioneer 10 travels beyond Pluto's orbit.
1990 Violeta Chamorro takes office as the President of Nicaragua, the first woman to hold the position.
2001 President George W. Bush pledges U.S. military support in the event of a Chinese attack on Taiwan.
2004 The March for Women's Lives brings between 500,000 and 800,000 protesters, mostly pro-choice, to Washington, D.C. to protest the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act of 2003 and other restrictions on abortion.
2005 A 7-car commuter train derails and crashes into an apartment building near Amagasaki Station in Japan, killing 107, including the driver.
2005 The final piece of the obelisk of Aksum is returned to Ethiopia after being stolen by the invading Italian army in 1937.
2005 Bulgaria and Romania sign the Treaty of Accession 2005 to join the European Union.
2007 Boris Yeltsin's funeral, the first to be sanctioned by the Russian Orthodox Church for a head of state since the funeral of Emperor Alexander III in 1894.
2014 The Flint water crisis begins when officials at Flint, Michigan switch the city's water supply to the Flint River, leading to lead and bacteria contamination.
2015 Nearly 9,100 are killed after a massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake strikes Nepal.
World Malaria Day.
Freedom Day Portugal.
Anzac Day Australia, New Zealand, Tonga.
Thanks for watching.